Good morning, everybody. Once again, as always, thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to support the Education and Workforce Development Council of the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. Your input, your participation, your support helps the Chamber accomplish some of its great ambitious goals. We have a very exciting speaker with us today, so we're going to run right through things. First, as the day progresses or as the morning progresses, if you look at the bottom of your agenda, there's a couple of hashtags that the Chamber is encouraging people to use for social media. Hashtag Every Kid Counts and hashtag School Every Day. Normally, we do self-introductions so that our guest knows who the audience contains. In the interest of time, why don't we just do a show of hands, check as many as are appropriate. How many folks here are from education? Okay. How many from governmental agencies? From the private sector, from the business community? And how many from community-based organizations? All right, so Attorney General, there you know who your folks are. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to tell you that there's a report on your in front of you on the table. It's a must-read. It is a very, very compelling read. Just 2 points in it. The first page talks about the relationship between third grade reading levels and ultimately high school graduation. On page 11, there's a chart that indicates how truancy can impact funding for schools and where it can, a 1% increase can cost a county like Los Angeles hundreds of millions of dollars. Those two facts alone should be enough to get you to turn some pages, but it's a great report, and encourage you to read it. With that, I guess I'll turn it over to David Rattray.
Thank you, Dean. I know you all came out to hear me speak to you for an hour. So I have a 2-hour speech prepared. Thanks, I need that support. So first of all, thank you, Attorney General, for honoring us with the release of your report happening here at the Chamber. You heard it here. Where great people come to do great work. And we're honored that this committee, the Education Committee, so let's also do one other thing. Can I do this, Dean? How many of you are members of the LA Chamber's Education Workforce Development Committee? So put your hands up high. So this is the backbone. These folks help us generate policies that create a platform where this chamber has established itself, I think, as one of the most enlightened business organizations in the country. And so thank you to all my council members. You have a lot of allies and guests with you today. You probably noticed that. So let me just set up this issue real fast, and we'll get to the star of our show. I hope you read every page of this report that just is being released today. It's stock full of the kind of things that some of you know we care about deeply. It has a set of policy recommendations that are very much aligned with things that we have fought for, but have some things that we need to fight for even more or add to this agenda. So look very closely at the policy recommendations that I'm sure will be covered. I think the Attorney General knows well, we have been intensely concerned about the chronic challenge around absenteeism. We started off, like so many business organizations, very focused at high school and the achievement gap, and started realizing that the highest disengagement and absenteeism is actually at kindergarten. And we got religion around that. So we're really excited about your leadership and raising that whole area. So we are part of a grade level reading campaign with First Five, and really proud to work with many of our partners here on issues around kinder readiness and grade level reading. So we're pleased about that. Thank you. I'll just take 1 second to again thank you. I didn't get a chance to go, but the Attorney General honored us in our work on Smart Justice and on our Back on Track program with an award. This chamber was very proud to support Prop 47 and this whole issue about disrupting permanently the school-to-prison pipeline and really building reentry programs that work. So thank you for recognizing us in that regard. and I can't wait to do all sorts of new stuff together. And the other thing I'll just add is link learning is, as we think about the consequence of absenteeism, we want kids at school, but we also want them engaged. And so that's why we're just crazy about link learning, because we want them there and we want them excited and engaged in their learning. So we're really excited about the whole set of policy recommendations. You will see at the back of your packet some really important documents. Some of them relate directly to some of the issues you're going to talk about. So I would encourage you also to just kind of page to the back of your packet, and you'll see the interplay between some of the issues that the Attorney General will bring up and some of the stuff that you're doing or we need to do more of. We do have a meeting on Friday that's actually related exactly to this topic about employer engagement for rehabilitation reentry. So for some of my business partners, I hope you might think about coming on Friday to that discussion. You'll see the flyer in there. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, who's going to have the honor to introduce our esteemed guest. So please welcome Danita Willoughby.
Thank you, David. I was so excited to have the honor to introduce our Attorney General, Kamala Harris. Kamala is a personal friend. She and my husband actually went to law school together. So at first, when we were playing around with the agenda, I was like, I want to introduce her. So I'm so excited to be here today. Kamala Harris is our 32nd Attorney General of the state of California and the first woman, the first African American, and South Asian to hold the office in the state's history. That's what I call busting through a glass ceiling. As California's chief law enforcement officer, Attorney General Harris advocates a smart-on-crime approach to public safety and is focused on combating transnational criminal organizations, recidivism reduction, and the adoption of technology and data-driven policing by law enforcement. In 2012, she began an initiative to highlight the direct connection between public education and public safety by commissioning California's first annual statewide report on elementary school truancy and chronic absenteeism. She is working collaboratively with educators, lawmakers, and community stakeholders to identify and implement solutions to this crisis. Earlier this year, she launched the Bureau of Children's Justice to increase accountability in California's child-serving systems and to focus the attention and resources of law enforcement and policymakers on children's rights. Please help me give a warm welcome to our Madam Attorney General, Kamala Harris. We welcome you.
Thank you, Danita. She has been introducing me for many years in many occasions, and I can't thank you enough for your friendship, but also for your leadership. And thank you, Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. It is wonderful to be back here among so many leaders. And the thing I know about you, especially our business leaders, is that you not only think of yourselves and conduct yourselves as leaders in business, but as civic leaders, and really understand the connection between the two. But you do it at great service and sacrifice in terms of your time and your commitment, and it means a lot to so many of us. Those of us who are here, who raised our hand when calling out the government folks, we so appreciate the partnerships that we have with you. And really, it does make the point that we are all together in the pursuit of excellence, and none of us can do it alone. So I thank you, the Chamber, for all that you do. I want to specifically also thank Dean and David for your leadership, and it's been so wonderful to work together with you on open justice, on what we were doing around Back on Track LA. There's a lot more work to do, but it has been a pleasure, and it has been so productive to work with you all. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to just dive right in. So, first of all, I think what we know, based on who is in this room, is that this issue of elementary school truancy is an issue that is so much broader and bigger than an educational issue. In fact, based on who we know is in this room and the leadership in your experience and what you do, we are making the point right here this morning. It's not only an issue of education, it's an issue about public safety, and it's an issue of what we will or will not have in terms of a healthy, much less thriving economy. The way I came to the issue of elementary school truancy is is a pretty clear path. About 10 years ago, when I was the elected district attorney of San Francisco, I was curious about this large number of people we had who were homicide victims who were under the age of 25. So we had a well-programmed and well-functioning system of dealing with it in terms of reacting to those crimes after it happened. But I was curious about who are they? Who are these victims? We have so many of them who are under the age of 25. So I commissioned a study in my office and quickly learned that 94% were high school dropouts. I then went over to the school district, tell me what's going on, and I learned that of the habitually and chronically truant students, up to 40% were elementary school students, who in many cases were missing 50, 60, up to 80 days of a 180-day school year, which, as we know, guarantees a sure path to failure in terms of their ability to actually be productive. So that was an area of focus for me back in those days, and it was part of what we talked about in terms of what should be a priority for the state. So as your Attorney General, I commissioned a study of our office, and with our partners, many of whom are in this room, let's do the first analysis in California on this issue of elementary school truancy. Let's go county by county and figure out what's going on. And so we published the first report back in, I believe it was 2012, that bore out exactly our hypothesis. In many school districts in California, we had up to 40% of the students in those districts being truant. And when we looked at it closer, we had a lot of information about why, and then there was a lot more information we needed. That was the first report that we titled In School on Track. We then commissioned another one, a second one, last year, and again, we looked into more details and more facts. And then today, we are presenting the third such report, which again is In School and on Track 2015. And we have purposely unveiled each report at the beginning of the school year as a way to renew the commitment we all have that school is now back in session, let's all get to work. So let's talk about it in the context of the chamber and the economy, education and the economy. Well, what I'm sure everyone in this room knows, because it is an undisputed fact, California is facing a shortage of skilled, educated workers. We are facing a shortage of skilled, educated workers. In fact, the data tells us that by 2025, just 10 years from now, 41% of California jobs will require a college degree. And current projections show that just 32% of the state's working age adults will have a college degree by that time. The projections tell us we will fall short. In California, the high school dropout rate, and we know this from our most recent study, rose to 11.6% this year. We know what that math means. More than 1 in 10 high school students, by the time they're in high school, will have dropped out. More than 1 in 10 California students will have dropped out before they graduate high school. Those numbers are not good in terms of projections. If we're talking about running a business, this is time to gather the shareholders together and critically examine what we are doing, both in terms of our effectiveness and also our return on investment. So let's look at the facts even more. We know the Brookings Institute actually found that Los Angeles, as a region, has one of the nation's worst youth employment rates. We know that in 2012, LA metro area's unemployment rate for young adults aged 20 to 24 was 57.5%, ranking, and this is not a point of great distinction, 86 out of 100. High school dropouts are almost twice as likely as high school graduates to be unemployed. High school dropouts are twice as likely as graduates to be unemployed. So there is a direct correlation, both in terms of our productivity, but also our preparedness to go into the next decade and be competitive as a state. And as one of the great states of our country, I would dare say this is the canary in the coal mine about what's going on in the rest of the country as well. But I believe that California leadership and the leadership coming out of this Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce can actually change these projections and change the numbers. And I think we have the time to do it, but we've got to start now. So part of our findings show that in the last 3 years since we have been doing this work, our dropout numbers have remained pretty consistent, and there's a lot more work to do there. We also have, in this new report, done more work in terms of looking at disparities in terms of race and gender. And I will share with you that our study shows, and it's in the report that you have in front of you, that not only do we not have enough skilled and educated workers, but those that are available do not, the skilled and educated workers that are available do not reflect California's diverse population. So in Los Angeles, 25% of African Americans and 11% of Latinos hold college degrees, compared to 49% of whites. We see similar disparities, right? There's a connection when you then look at disparities and ethnic and racial disparities in terms of high school graduates or dropouts. In particular, we see that high school dropout rates statewide tell us that African Americans are Asian Americans 5%, white Americans 8%, Latino 14%, African American 20%. There is a correlation that is very clear. Let's talk about the impact to our economy then, and to public safety more directly. Beyond worker shortage, high school dropouts cost us as a state an enormous amount of money. They exact a huge toll on our public fisc. So, what we know from the analysis that we have been doing over the last 3 years, dropouts cost California $46 billion, that's B, $46 billion a year in the burden they place on our public safety system, public health system, social services, and what they're not contributing in terms of lost wages and lost gains in terms of our tax base. Over a lifetime, a college graduate will earn $1 million more than a high school dropout. So that makes the point about what's contributing to our tax base or not, and what's contributing to our economy. And for the members of the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce who will either be your patrons or not be your patrons because they just can't afford to engage in the economy. High school dropouts are 2.5 times as likely to be on public assistance as high school graduates. Dropouts reduce California's tax revenue alone by $1 billion a year. Then let's move on to the public safety costs. Nationally, high school dropouts are 3.5 times more likely than high school dropouts to be arrested, and more than 8 times as likely to be incarcerated. Increasing graduation rates by a mere 10% will reduce violent crime by 20%. This is achievable, folks. And then let's look at it and think about it in terms of the public health model, right? Let's think of it in the context of the return on our investment. You know, many of you have heard me say that I think that on criminal justice policy for so long we've been offered a false choice, which suggests on criminal justice policy you're either soft on crime or tough on crime. Instead of asking, are we smart on crime? Instead of adopting the public health model, which tells us so well, when dealing with an epidemic, be it a health epidemic or a crime epidemic, the smartest way to confront and deal with it is prevention first. If the sniffles take on, early intervention. If we're dealing with it in the emergency room or the prison system, it is far too late and much too expensive. The public health model is a guide for us about what we should do to be smart on crime. Emphasis, resources on prevention. The other way that we measure our effectiveness, it is a cold-blooded, fabulous measure. ROI. 3 simple letters that make a profound point. What are we putting in and what are we getting out? Are we getting the benefit of our bargain? And I would suggest to you on all of these axes, whether we are thinking of it in the context of the public health model or we are measuring effectiveness based on the return on investment, we are not getting the benefit for our bargain. But I believe and I know we can improve. And I will tell you why I know that. Since we've been doing this work of publishing these reports. Danita mentioned we created the Bureau of Children's Justice, and we have been focusing on this issue. We have been issuing findings. And so in the last 3 years since we have been issuing these findings, there have been many points that I've already made. But in addition, the 2015 report makes other findings, new findings. One, the rate of truancy, chronic absenteeism in elementary school students is obviously too high. The updated data that we present in the 2015 report shows that we have 230,000 elementary school students in California who are chronically and habitually truant. That's 8% of all elementary school students in California are chronically truant. Almost 10%, almost 1 in 10. Another finding, and this bears very, very important note and is a very significant new finding. The crisis is alarmingly high among kindergartners. Chronic absence rate among kindergartners is the highest of any cohort of students in school. Kindergartners, you can see from this graph, and I think one coming up, have the highest rate of chronic truancy, 15%. And obviously that places our children in academic risk before they've even really started on their journey. The new data that we show also relates to something that we have now been tracking and been able to track, which is low-income students, students of color, and other at-risk students. And what this report shows you is 75% of chronically absent elementary school students in California are low income. I'm going to say that again. 75% of chronically absent elementary school students in California are low income. In 2014-2015, the last school year, nearly 20% of African American and Native American elementary school students were chronically absent. And these numbers impact different children differently. The data also tells us that reading scores for chronically absent Latino kindergartners, so for chronically absent Latino kindergartners, their reading scores are far lower than those of non-Latino students who are chronically absent. There are disparities even within these cohorts. Another finding, and this is new again in the 2015 report, discipline rates. And I want to commend and thank Bob Ross for being one of the first people that ever talked to me and say, start taking a look at this, Kamala, and the California Endowment. So we collected data on discipline rates, and for the first time, we have data that includes gender. So this is what I can tell you from our findings. African American boys are 5 times more likely to be suspended than all other boys. African American girls, while less likely than black boys to be suspended, are almost 9 times more likely to be suspended than all other girls, and are suspended at the same rate as all other boys, excluding African American boys. African American boys are 5 times more likely. African American girls are 9 times more likely. And we're talking about elementary school students. We're talking about kindergartners, 1st grade, 2nd grade, right? Also, findings show in the 2015 report, of course, and we've made this point earlier, but we've now updated the data. Over the 4 years that we've been able to go back, California school districts have left $4.5 billion on the table in unreimbursed funding, because, of course, funding is tied to attendance. So every school year, on average, California school districts leave about $1 billion on the table. And over the last 4 years, in total, it's about $4.5 billion. With a B. It's a lot of money. And I will tell you what that money can buy, because we also want to put it in context. Sounds like a lot of money. Well, what can it buy? Well, it can buy 53,000 more teachers, 2 billion school lunches, 63,000 school nurses, 300 million books. That money can buy a lot of help, but we need to have those kids in school every day. So if we're going to be smart as taxpayers, and I'm going to say again using this metaphor because I am at the chamber and I respect what you do and how you think. If we're going to be smart as taxpayers and as shareholders, I would suggest that we need to project forward over the next 10 years. Let's roll out the projections and then assess what we're doing now and whether we're going to be in the red or the black. What are we doing now? Let's project it out to figure out what is going on with the 8-year-olds today who in 10 years, we already talked about what 2025 means. What's going on with the 8-year-olds today who will be 18 in 2025? And ask whether or not they will participate in our economy or be a threat to our public safety. And by the way, the 8-year-old today is in 3rd grade. So let's talk about that as a statistic that everyone in this room knows, and we will say over and over again in each report as we have done. The significance of 3rd grade reading level. By the age of 3, by the end of 3rd grade, if a child is not at 3rd grade reading level, they literally drop off. It is well accepted by all education, folks and experts and educators. By the end of 3rd grade, if a child is not at 3rd grade reading level, they literally drop off. Why? Because before 3rd grade, a child is learning how to read. Then comprehension kicks in, and they're reading to learn. If they have not learned how to read words, they cannot read those words to learn what those words mean. 3rd grade, 8-year-olds, 10 years from now will be 18. The math is really simple on this one. So let's project out. Where will we be in 10 years, and what will be our earnings report in 10 years? So that brings me to good news, because my goodness, Kamala, that's a really depressing stuff. You got anything else for us? Okay, I got a little bit more. The good news. And the good news is that this is solvable. There is no question. Hetty, you've been doing this work. Hetty Chang's been doing this work forever. We've been doing this work since San Francisco. You know, Hetty has not given up at all. And, and so what we know since we've been publishing this report, this is the 3rd one. So we've been tracking the changes that we have seen over the last 2 years. And one of the things we know is because of the coverage and because of the conversation and the activism of people in this room and outside of this room, awareness of this issue has substantially increased. One of the things we know is that we purposely broke down the statistics county by county, and local press and local county administrators then could see what was going on in their backyard and be held accountable by the parents and the families and the folks in those areas. So information and awareness has increased, and this is the progress then that we've seen since our first report. One, we have seen a 10% increase in tracking and monitoring. Basically, what we have seen is that school districts are collecting and monitoring attendance at a much better rate. In fact, year over year, we've seen an increase from 72% to 82%. That is significant. We have seen a 6% increase in districts communicating with schools at least once a month about truancy chronic absence, right? Because the school district should be keeping all this information and then talking with the schools in that district. An example of this is in Corona Norco in the Unified School District, which is in Riverside County, that they have been using data to make sure that all school staff, and remember the school, the environment, the ecosystem of a school, it's not only teachers, it's the principal, it's the folks who work in the cafeteria, it's the secretaries, right? It's the bus drivers, the ecosystem. What they've been doing, as an example in Riverside, in Corona Norco, is they've been using data to make sure all school staff have the information about attendance histories. Very smart. We've also seen improvements in the last 2 years in terms of school districts investing in smarter discipline policies. So since we've been talking about this, and Bob Ross, again, you've been doing this work for so long, over 50% of school districts we've tracked have made changes to their policies over the last 2 years to reduce suspensions. Because, of course, we know what a suspension means. A suspension means, regardless of the reason, and not that we should dismiss the reason, but it means the kid's not in class. And so we want the children to be in class. That's part of the premise here, right? That's part of our hypothesis, is that it's actually better for that child to be in class than not in class. So we've seen improvements there. We've also seen improvements in parent engagement in the last couple of years, statewide. An example of one is in Long Beach. In the Long Beach Unified School District, it cut its elementary absence rates in half over the course of one school year by increasing contacts with parents and the referrals of those parents to services. So literally just communicating with parents, coming up with creative ways to get the parent to come in so they can talk about it. Because one of the challenges that we know is that we also are operating often about policy relating to children from the myth that children are resilient and that they can catch up, right? They'll be fine. They'll go to high school every day. They'll go to middle school every day, right? They'll catch up. And we need to educate parents and engage them and let them know these earliest years are critical to what we will accomplish or not later. Over the last 2 years, we've also seen increased awareness. In fact, more than 60% of the school districts that we interacted with to compile the latest study cited increased awareness as a reason for the changes in their attendance programs, and then significantly for the Chamber public-private partnerships. One example of that is my office has been partnering with the Ad Council to do basically a public education campaign. And good for them, they do their work by saying, first we're going to study the issue before we develop an ad. So they have been issuing surveys and studying this issue and interacting with parents and doing focus groups. And the study then that we commissioned together with them of parents of young children found that a lot of parents had a misconception about attendance that led to, of course, unnecessary absences. And part of the misconception was they thought that attendance is not as important in elementary school as in high school. They assumed that their kids would catch up later. And they thought that absences are okay as long as the parent signs off. But think about that, because then if the parent signs off and somebody then approves it, so it must be okay. So these findings were very significant. What we did to address that is we're releasing a toolkit this month for tips for educators and community on how to interact with parents, and then the public education campaign, which I know we're working with the Chamber on. So in closing, I want to just end where I started. The issue of educating our youngest children is about allowing the children of our community, of our state, to reach their potential. And it is about our public safety, and it is about our economy. And as far as I'm concerned, if you care about any one of those, I will not blame you or fault you for not caring about the other, but pick one and let that be your motivation for acting. Because again, as the shareholders, and we all are, we're not getting the return on our investment. Our projections are not good, but we have enough time to turn this thing around and to get out of the red and be in the black. So I want to thank everybody, and I'm happy to answer any questions.